This video is to show you some of the ways to use Think Pink, Go Green as a marking policy that encourages or indeed forces your students to respond to your marking and therefore make progress. One reason to do this is that it has an immediate visual impact so that you can clearly see how frequently you're marking your students' work. It's immediately apparent as you flick through the book. If you're like me, you won't be organised enough to say I mark this class on this Friday and that class on that Wednesday and this class on that Tuesday. I simply don't have a lifestyle that enables me to follow a rigid pattern. So having this visual cue for myself is going to force me to mark more frequently, or at least more regularly. The other pleasant feature about it is that it forces me to consider how much future marking I'm going to do, because I delineate in green the space that the student is going to respond in, and that minimises my marking. So simply put, here you can see the classwork that this student has done, and I've managed to target a much smaller amount that I have to mark in response. So in theory the student improves, but in practice I also reduce my marking burden. And the key to feedback, of course, is that it reaches the student in time, and the shorter response that you can ask from a student, the more impact that will have, because you can turn around the marking that much more quickly. Here I put my pink around my EBI as well as what went well, and the advantage of having a separate box in green is that I can be much more specific in what I want the student to do in order to meet this even better if. So here I've got a student who's got English as a foreign language, and she doesn't have very good control of tenses for a native speaker. Consequently, I'm giving her the conditional tense here. Write another paragraph using would, could and should. Marking for me here has been incredibly easy. You can see by my ticks she's met that target. I've then told her that there's a letter missing here. I haven't asked her to replace that, but she's done it anyway. And I've quickly found that she's met her target quite easily. She's understood exactly what she had to do. Here's the book of an equally able but much less diligent student. Here I've been able to mark for literacy incredibly quickly. I've simply just used my green pen. So this is go, this is what I want you to change, and I've just highlighted spots where he has made a mistake or hasn't included something. It's a spelling or punctuation mistake, hence the literacy. Because he's an able student for this group, it's a CD class, I haven't had to specify whether it's punctuation or spelling, and also that's self-evident from where my green highlighting is going. If it's between words, then logically it has to be some sort of punctuation. And you can see that he's then gone in and corrected it. And most of his corrections are accurate. However, in my target, I decided that the problem here wasn't a lack of knowledge, it was a lack of application of that knowledge, and so I've asked for a paragraph which is 100% correct. And you can see in his response here that he's made 2 mistakes and actually is not 100% correct, and he's actually got worse. The advantage for me here as a teacher is I can see that my next EBI has to be connected to commas here. He's using the comma splice, separating sentences with a comma instead of full stop or a semicolon. This is another student in that same CD class who has written an autobiographical song. This was one of my earlier attempts. Now I would have my pink going round the what went well as well. But here I had it just on the EBI because it's what I wanted her to think about. Look for a rhyming structure like you do in verse 2 and the chorus. Again, I've delineated a small space so that I won't have much marking to do, and in my marking I've then just listed the rhyme scheme. I actually got it wrong here, that D should be a half rhyme with E, so actually it would be an E, but I was right here, she has cracked it, she's got the rhyme scheme sorted. And this marking was consequently incredibly quick for me, but it has led to significant improvement in the lyrics of her song. This is the same student who has begun to put in a massive effort in English, but as you can see here, made 11 mistakes in her next bit of writing. I've begun to write much longer what went wells because I'm developing a picture of skills that I want all my year 10s to have. And it suddenly occurred to me that if I keep a record in the book of the What Went Wells, I've got a steadily building picture of the skills that I've taught and also that the student is acquiring and mastering. I try to keep these brief to single words so they don't take long to read, but also they're then a very quick summary for me so I can easily distinguish where this student is at without having to read their work. The EBIs are then very clearly focused and quite short, and because she's a hard-working student, I've given her a very large box to fill. Now, this might be counterproductive because it would lead to lots of marking, but actually remember I've only got 2 targets that I'm going to focus on, and the other target was just to count the number of errors. Do you remember there were 11 in the last piece, and here with my circles you can see there are 2. Now, without using a think pink go green kind of approach, my previous marking might have been to reward this student for her excellent improvement in having fewer errors. She's reduced them significantly by about 80%. But because my EBI has now been so focused, I can return to that target, and here we go. I can see that she hasn't managed to use the apostrophes as I asked, so now I'm going to give her 3 sentences that she has to write. Each one needs an owner that needs an apostrophe, and that small space is what she's going to write in. Again, it will give me much less marking, but it will focus exactly on where she needs to go next. Because I'm marking for literacy, I will still highlight spelling mistakes, and the student will have to correct that when she gets the book back. That will just be a routine in the lesson. This marking is from Charlie's class. It's a bottom set Year 8 English group. You can see that the English department use a stamp for what went well and even better if. The good news about that is it minimises your marking. You don't have to write too much. It looks brilliant. I stopped using mine, I'm very sorry Beth, for 2 reasons. One is it wasn't set straight, so when I put the stamp down this came out skew width, and secondly the ink on it didn't work very well, so my words got smudged and I kind of lost patience. However, even if it were working brilliantly now, it doesn't quite suit my listing of what went wells, because as you've seen I need a longer list to keep track of the skills that my student is building. Charlie has introduced an extra step into her marking, dating it so that she can easily see if she's marking frequently enough to her own satisfaction or to department policy. She's also incredibly focused. Can you include a review from a satisfied customer? Here the student is going to derive a tremendous sense of achievement even though they're writing very little. The other thing it tells Charlie is the standard of literacy of this student, and it's very high for a student in a bottom Year 8 set. Usually you'll miss the comma before opening speech marks. Very likely they'd miss the capitals, but that was one of the targets that Charlie had set. The apostrophes used correctly. Highly unusual to use the semicolon correctly. These are no doubt things that Charlie's been teaching throughout the course of Year 8, and she's easily able to see mastery displayed here, even in such a short piece of writing. Again, correct use of the apostrophe, quotation marks used after the full stop. Again, that's something that frequently goes wrong. Again, correct use of the apostrophe here. Very high standard. It's giving her excellent feedback. In addition, she's simply marked for literacy here by circling problems, and the student has corrected it quite easily, and there again. So visually very easy for Charlie to see the progress, for the student to see the progress. The student has improved in a huge number of ways in this short space, and it hasn't taken Charlie too long to mark it and set up the task that the student has to do. If you went away and described to someone this kind of triple marking, student does work, teacher marks, student responds, teacher marks a response, it actually might sound an insane pressure. But when you see it in action like this, it's not only manageable, it clearly leads to really good progress from the student. Here's another example from the same class. Whereas I'd highlighted in green what I wanted my students to correct, Charlie has highlighted in pink what she wants her students to think about. Think pink. So these 1, 2 and 3 correspond to the even better if. You vary your sentence starters. How are you going to do that? Can you rewrite those 3 sentences so that they don't begin with I? And that always leads to sophisticated writing. If you look at your literacy mats, at the different sentence beginnings, you'll see the request for some to start with a verb, sniffing the air as this student has here, and again started with a verb here. Characteristic of really good writing. Usually when you start like this you follow with a comma. The students grasped it here. Here the comma isn't needed, and Charlie hasn't had to correct that because it's not part of the target that she set. So again, she knows instantly that the student has met the target that she set, and in a future piece of work she can choose whether to return to this issue of the comma, which is developing as we can see here, or not. Again, it has all the advantages of brevity, and not for brevity's sake, but because it really focuses on that one skill that she thinks her student most needs to improve on. Again, it's superbly visual. You can easily see as a teacher how your students are responding and how often you're getting them to think about improving. So I really hope that's been useful. I'll make another video next week perhaps, showing different uses that teachers of subjects other than English have found, because after all your subject may not involve huge amounts of writing.